Welcome to my channel. I always feel so funny saying that, but yeah, it's my channel.
I gotta find peace of mind. I know now I have to face. I gotta find peace of mind.
The last video that I posted on my YouTube channel, formerly known as Titty Talks, was back in like 2019, I want to say. It's been a few years and always saw myself as a yapper, but I never really leaned into it. At that time, I was in a totally different place in my life. I was dealing with a lot in my life that I couldn't make sense of. And now, these years later, I feel like I'm in a totally different place and I'm ready to actually commit to having a YouTube channel, being transparent and vulnerable and authentically me. My original YouTube channel was known as Titty Talks. That was 5 years ago that I posted my first YouTube video, and it was like a completely different version of me. I mean, we're always changing, but 5 years, Titty was my childhood nickname. So when I was in high school, I used to go by Titty because of the rapper 2 Chainz was known as Titty Boy. That's always been like a nickname for friends of mine to me. And it kind of represents like just a younger me, like a really outdated version of Tamara. Even though I still go by Titty, I am Tamara. That is my government name. And so it felt very fitting to come back to YouTube and sharing a little bit of my truth, but also just in a newer era of myself. Instead of going by Titty Talks, I am gonna go by The Selfish Gardener. So it's a bit of a pivot into this, like I said, a little bit more evolved me, like a little bit more fitting to the era of my life that I'm in. The reason that I wanted to pivot to The Selfish Gardener was because there's been a lot of like comparison to gardening in my life, like having your own garden and being able to tend to it and being able to recognize what your garden needs. For a lot of my life, I compared my garden or my life to what other people were doing or what their story was, and you really can't compare. I've really learned what it means to tend to your garden, what it means to be a little bit more selfish in your journey and in your path. And I think that that's really what I'm trying to navigate, is having my own garden, tending to it, and also being able to like remove what's stopping my growth, remove or stop anything that is obscuring or obstructing who I want to be in this life and what I envision for myself. So that's really the premise of The Selfish Gardener. It's just tending to your own garden and being able to be proud of, you know, the work that you put in and who you are as a person, understanding and accepting how to be a little bit more selfish in your life. Not in a self-serving way, but more so in a way that you're not catering to everybody else before your own needs. And that's really what I want to convey in my journey. My name is Tamara. I am also known as T-Money or Titty. And I've, you know, just like anybody else, been on my own personal journey. And I think like I'm just excited to share a little bit more about what I've learned over the past maybe 5 years since I last posted on YouTube, but also just going forward, what I'm looking forward to in my life and what I've learned about myself on this journey. If you are rocking with me, then subscribe and we will go on this journey together. I am currently 30 years old, and when I turned 30, there was like this switch that went off in my brain. And you know, whenever they say like your age starts getting a little bit serious, that's how I feel. I feel like when I turned 30, it felt like, oh shit. I always envisioned 30 as being like super old and wrinkly, and then you get there and you're like, oh, like I'm still a kid. I'm still just navigating life and figuring things out. When I first started my YouTube channel, that was 5 years ago, I was 25. And the place that I was then versus now is like totally, completely different. So I bring up being 30 because when I turned 30, I felt a pivot. I felt a shift in myself where I didn't want to do things that didn't feel authentic to my path. And one of those really big things was my career. I've been in what you would call a corporate environment for 5 years. Although it was great money and stability, I had this like visceral gut feeling of like, I'm really overstaying my welcome. I'm not really meant to be in this space. And I never ever really listened to that gut feeling because I'm a Capricorn, so like I value stability. And there just came this point in time where I couldn't ignore it anymore, and literally turned 30 in February of this year. I quit my job, and that was like the first leap of faith that I really took for myself, listening to that visceral gut feeling, because I think that gut feeling is intuition. It is your body and your mind and your spirit telling you this isn't for you anymore. And I really didn't have a backup plan. I turned 30, quit my job, and I went to South Africa for a month. So that's where I am right now. I'm in my uncle's backyard, and I feel different. Like, I feel very free. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a bunch of money saved up. This was just what I understood that I needed to do. And I can't explain it, but I think what I aim to get out of creating YouTube content again is to help somebody else out there listen to their visceral gut feeling. If nothing else, I hope that I can help somebody understand themselves a little bit better, maybe just through talking through kind of the patterns and the cycles in my life, and what I had to change or what I had to pivot from in order to be in this place that I am in my life. You know, I quit my job, came to South Africa to visit family, and I've been very blessed, like, to have a family that I could stay with for a month and be able to just like vibe, just chill. Like, this is the first time that I've had time to sit and actually think about who I am when I'm not in all these different roles. Like, who am I if I'm not in this career path, if I'm not contributing to what I think is supposed to be, what society thinks I'm supposed to be doing. You know what I mean? Clock in every single day, clock out, rinse, repeat. Like, I've always been such a career focused person. So to not have a job and essentially call myself unemployed is like a luxury, I think. To not have a job and not really be stressed. I definitely recognize that that's not something that everybody can do. Quitting my job was the leap for me. That was what I needed to be able to step out into a place of like discomfort. In my role and in my job, I found a lot of stability and security in always knowing where that check came from, always knowing what was gonna hit my account. And I didn't want to quit my job. It was like the hardest place to be, the hardest visceral gut feeling to have. Once I took that leap, everything else felt everything else was natural, everything else was organic. But that was like the first big step that I needed to take. Coming here, I wanted to spend an extended amount of time. So I really wanted to come for about a month, and then I ended up extending my stay, and I'm now gonna be here for about 2 months now. It's been like a really whirlwind experience, like one thing after the other, of turning 30, quitting my job, coming to Africa, and spending time with family. And I think this time in my life is really about reclaiming my gratitude. It's sometimes enjoyable, but it's still been very medicinal. When it came to quitting my job, I kept getting this visceral gut feeling, this call that I liken that to intuition, especially because that path forward felt really hard. It was totally out of my comfort zone. I'm such a stability person. Like, to quit your job in this market, everybody kept saying, that's crazy. Like, that's not something that you should do. It wasn't recommended. Every time I asked for advice, it was always like, bitch, what the fuck are you talking about? And rightfully so. I think when you ask for advice from other people, they're operating from what they would do in your position or in your situation. So the people that love me the most cared about my stability and really cared about my safety. And that's not always a bad thing, but it's also not necessarily what I'm here to listen to. You know what I mean? Like, although they prioritize my safety, I also have to make the best decision for myself, knowing exactly what I need in this point in my life. So again, this was just totally out of my comfort zone, and I felt like my future self, she just already existed. She already was working through telling me where to go, and she knew the best out of anyone of like what the next step was. So, you know, I didn't really know exactly after quitting my job what my life was supposed to look like. I just knew how I wanted it to feel, and that was what I basically have always prioritized, how my life should feel. There's that feeling when you know you've just outgrown a place in your life or a chapter, you know, a job, a relationship, a friendship. Sometimes you can physically feel it. And no matter how hard you try to ignore that achy, uncomfortable feeling, you've got to almost embrace it and allow yourself to feel where that fear is coming from and let it speak to you. A lot of times that fear is usually like these different parts of yourself that are neglected and need a little bit of love or need a little bit of recognition. Understanding, am I holding on to this because, you know, I have an abandonment wound that makes me feel like I felt when I was a kid, you know, making sense of letting go of people who no longer fit into your puzzle anymore. And I think that's what it means to evolve. That's what it means to change. Like, it doesn't always mean that the people in your life have to change, but sometimes you do have to go. That's what selfish gardener is to me. Sometimes the soil is not going to help you grow. So at what point do you feel yourself withering inside of these conditions? Do you change the soil? Do you change these conditions? I felt like I had a pattern in my life that kept repeating itself, even in the capacity of just a career. I knew that corporate wasn't somewhere I wanted to stay. I didn't want to continue to work for somebody else, but I had to lean into the discomfort of not having that stability or not having that job, that comfort that I'm so used to having. Patterns in your life will continue to repeat themselves until you choose differently. Maybe those are reactions and emotions that you're disconnected from and you need to give light to. Or, you know, maybe you're carrying things that don't really belong to you, but you're still carrying them. That's the shit that gets heavy. I think we all have something that makes us feel inadequate, like those really ugly, tender, vulnerable, soft, squishy parts of us that we really don't want anyone to know about. Having a career was my identity. Having stability, being able to have the freedom of financial independence, that was always something that I really valued, and having a job provided that. For me, I felt when I was in that job, getting a raise or getting more money, that was the capacity of what I thought my abundance could be. And I didn't feel like I could see outside of that or see more than that unless I were to leave that role. And just in general, my mindset is not to continue to stay in a job for the next 30 years and then die in that same role. Like, that was never my goal. For some people that works, and I don't think that one is better than the other, but it's just a different path. So for me, I always knew that mindset wasn't really gonna work for me. You know, I had a friend who, her dad worked for the same company for like 60 years and then retired and passed away like a week after he retired, and never got to see or enjoy any of the work that he put into, the dedication to a certain job that he had, and he thought he was doing the right thing. And again, maybe that's what his path was. But it just, for me, that generation comes from a place of fear sometimes. Again, I'm not, everybody's role, everybody's path is different. I just felt like that wasn't what my path is. I crashed out a little bit because I'm like, if I dedicated so much time to one thing, how could I not see a return on that investment? At the end of the day, this is about my path, and there's no time wasted. There's nothing goes to waste. Like, all of that was teaching me about who I am and what I wanted out of my life. So, I'm very proud of that step. I felt like once I was able to actually quit my job and leave, that was when life sort of opened up for me. And being in South Africa for a month, now 2 months, could have only happened from me taking that leap and leaning into the discomfort. And I think the discomfort right now for me is the gift. Learning about who I am, what I do on a day-to-day basis, or what I value when I'm not working, it's been an uncomfortable process, because even in this trip, I've tried to be constantly productive. The first 2 weeks of my trip, I was packing everything in and trying to, do all of these things and see all these things. And of course, that's all fine and well, but who are you when you're being still? Who are you when you're being quiet, when you don't have your days filled? So I think I was still trying to find that productivity so that I could find my value or my worth inside of that productivity. So now I've had the opportunity to kind of mellow out during this trip and just be still and figure out what I want. And that's where this YouTube content comes in. It's always something that I've wanted to do and be able to speak to just sort of the things that I'm going through, and to be able to now have the time to do it. It's like, why am I avoiding doing it? It's just weird. So now that I have the time to slow down, I owe it to myself to say the things that I've been wanting to say. And I can't really, I don't want to wait until things are perfect to execute. I didn't have a plan when I quit my job. I just quit my job. And I'm not saying to be dumb and or do what I did and not have a plan, but I also felt like I can't wait until I have an X amount of dollars saved before I quit my job, or I can't wait until I have the next thing sorted out to quit my job. In the raw stages of it, you can't wait until everything's perfect to live your life and execute. Yeah, I think we do try to execute life perfectly and it comes from a good place. We try to do things very well, and sometimes like that gust of wind, I can't wait till it's perfectly still. Sometimes you gotta talk in the wind. You gotta talk when shit is not the best of circumstances. This is just my raw journey, being 30 years old, trying to navigate what life has given me. Also be open to receive. I think you can't receive if you're always in the same place and always trying to plan things out perfectly or make sure that you execute and it looks perfect. It's just not gonna happen. You are going to need to lean into the discomfort or make those decisions, take those leaps when shit isn't comfortable and when shit isn't perfect. And that is where you find yourself, in the discomfort. That's the gift. Also, maybe a part of me that didn't want to acknowledge quitting my job or resonate with the idea of being unemployed. Like I said, a lot of my worth has always been from being financially independent, being able to provide for myself, which I've had to do for a lot of my life. A lot of the divine messaging that I've received when I've had the time to be still or pray or meditate on this chapter of my life is just being seen. So much of what I've had to fight through is being perceived. Talking about quitting my job at 30 with no plan is terrifying. There are a lot of people that I've seen in my life who are on their paths already and doing very well for themselves, but nobody has it all figured out. For me, for a very long time, age was a very big deal, especially when you think about the concept of where you are in your life versus where you should be, and that idea of comparison and thinking about the women I see that maybe are in their careers or in their jobs and have what I think I want. A lot of this time in my life is just getting out of my own way, doing the hard things, and also shifting my perspective from my age and my choices, but also just the fear of judgment for the choices I'm making. It's shifting my perspective to what if I can inspire someone to listen to themselves and take a scary next step. I've also been given the time to study, women whose work I admire that didn't really get things cracking until their early to late 30s. You think about like the Toni Morrisons, the Zora Neale Hurston, Mariah Carey even. Like every day of every year of your life, you get to decide who you want to show up as. And this time for me has not been about rushing through life. It's just been enjoying my journey and acknowledging that I'm okay with delayed gratification. I may not fully even understand myself why I've chosen this path, but I do owe it to myself to trust the path forward and trust the process as well. We all have different paths here, and this is mine. In previous years, I would say that I felt a lot like I was in a waiting room. I'm waiting around for the right thing to do, the right thing to say, waiting around for possibly perfection or for all of the circumstances to look correct in my mind. And I felt like I was in a waiting room, and I feel like this is the first year where instead of waiting, I'm acting, I'm executing, and I'm out of that waiting room. Again, talking about delayed gratification, if I had gotten the things that I wanted or that I thought I wanted, then life would have looked totally different. So now being able to let life work itself out in the ways that it's supposed to, rather than how I think it should look, and just carrying on forward, that has been the biggest life changer. I would have never been given this gift to not have to worry about having a career or getting to spend time with family that I don't get to see because they live in a different continent. These are gifts that I've been given. So I think that it's how you choose to see your life and how you choose to show up for it as well. In your own life, in your own garden that you are trying to make the most beautiful flowers and the most beautiful plants and have everything bloom exactly the way you want it to look, you can't really force those things to grow. You can't force you can only sow your seeds. Keep using this comparison, and obviously we'll continue to use this comparison of having your own garden, but you can't force them to grow. You can only remove what stops them from growing. So sometimes, at least for me, it's been just getting out of my own way and or doing the difficult things, leaning into the discomfort, but also at the same time trusting my gut, trusting the intuition that I have for my path forward, even when I don't understand it. That's faith. That's divine understanding. And the more that I do that in my life, the more that I think life is going to open up for me. And I can't really see all the ways that it's going to do that. And I can't know all of the information as much as I want to. I think we as humans, we have natural curiosity to know absolutely everything before we make a decision. We want to be well informed. That's what you call a hypothesis. It's a well-informed guesstimation, like estimated guess. When you accept not having all the answers and trusting that that's okay, and having a lot more grace with yourself as well in that process, a lot of things open up for you. I have a lot more to say, to speak on. right now, I just wanted to introduce you to the selfish gardener. And also, side note, being out of the United States has done wonders for my mental health. Being here, being in South Africa, it's not, there's a lot to acknowledge in this country as well. A lot of poverty, a lot of political unrest, a lot of violence against women. So it's not all rainbows and sunshine. I acknowledge that, being in a different country, I get to do it in a way where I'm staying with family, and I'm very privileged to see the good that this place has to offer, which is beaches and mountains and family dinners and community, things that I didn't really get in the United States. But there's also a different life that other people are living as well. But being outside of the United States definitely is also a gift. Being away from what's happening in the US politically is a gift. And being able to be away from that has, again, done wonders for my mental health. So whoever is trying to leave the United States and go somewhere else, please do it. The food here is different. Being in salt and sunshine and ocean has again, just cleared a lot of the blocks that I felt like I had. I can think differently. And also, again, that's contributed to the fact that I'm not working every single day. Obviously, at some point, the little funds that I do have are going to run out, and I've got to figure out a plan. But at the same time, I know that I can't stress about things that haven't happened yet or I don't have control over. I have to really enjoy the present moment and then figure out a plan. There's a lot of magic in not having things figured out, and that's what I keep trying to remind myself is I have the pleasure and the joy of being in this unknown place. It doesn't always have to be so terrifying and so scary. If you got anything from this video, it is let it all work out. Before I go, I just want to show you. This is the beautiful house that I'm staying at. It is my uncle's house. There is a pool and there's a little clothing line, and when I'm having my coffee in the morning, I will sit out here and journal and watch the clothes on the hanging line, the clothesline, sway in the wind. And there's just kind of this moment of simplicity and peace. Let it all work out, because 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, it's gonna work out better than what you could have imagined for yourself. And that's divinity. That is being an alchemist and being able to take your situation and transform it into something greater than what you could have ever imagined. A lot of that is trust in self, trust in the process, and let it all work out. I hope that you'll strap in and listen to some of my stories and some of what I'm here to do, or what I feel I'm here to do. A lot of that involves yapping, unfortunately. The Selfish Gardener still has a lot to do and sow and reap, but I hope you are enjoying this transition into an evolved Tamara. And I got a lot more to say and do. I know that much, but I hope you stick along for the ride.